And now, part 2 of I, Robot You, Jane. A lot of info is imparted in passing on master shots in this episode. The camera pans by a kid who saw positive Nazi propaganda on the computer, so we get information imparted in interesting ways here. Buffy says Xander is jealous. Xander is worried Malcolm is an axe murderer. They don't know anything about him. When Fritz is on the PC, he's really jacked in and he's doing that carving of the M. It's done so well. Again, beautiful makeup effects there. Ooh, blood. Ooh, carving. Okay, Drew, you definitely do bring a different perspective. At the locker, when Willow and Buffy talk, it becomes clear that Malcolm has been pitting them against one another. He said that Buffy wouldn't understand, and he's dividing them. That goes back to my number 1 point. Predators do this. They isolate people. It's really a tactic, and you can see it being personified here by a non-person doing it in this episode.
We're brought up to believe in romance, and unfortunately, a lot of times it's the idea of the Romeo and Juliet scenario where nobody wants us to be together, and that makes our love so much better and so much stronger. And I think a lot of these characters end up using that against more vulnerable people.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about makes me think about that thing that we are sort of told that it's romance when it isn't. If someone wants all of your time to themselves, or they can't live without you, or certain kind of stalking behaviors, which are truly the antithesis of romance and real connection and love, but we are brought up to think that some of those things are the ideal, and it makes it much easier for all of us, including Willow, to fall into those traps.
If only we listened to our friends more often.
Did you think that Dave, he looks like if you mixed David Spade and Tom Lenk, who played Andrew on Buffy, if you mix them together?
Yes.
And Dave is played by Chad Lindbergh. He played Jesse in The Fast and the Furious, Ash in 5 episodes of Supernatural, and recently appeared in 4 episodes of Star Trek Picard. When Buffy calls email an e-letter, that really tells you the time frame. I don't think I ever called it an e-letter. Did you?
I've never heard that before. And I thought that was like a romantic way of putting it, but I've never heard that ever.
No, I haven't either. I kind of like it, an e-letter. I will e-letter you later, Sire Rebecca. The tone is a bit different in this episode to the other episodes. Buffy asks if she should tail Dave in dark glasses and a trench coat, and then she does.
I thought that was funny.
I did too. I thought it was very noir. I want to mention the 6th point or theme at this point, which is surveillance society. Buffy is at the research lab and is tracked by Malcolm, and it's very George Orwellian a la 1984, as are all the ways that these things have escalated in our lives. The last time Dev and I were in the UK, we were riding the tube, and there are no longer people working in the kiosks. Part of what we were talking about earlier in terms of replacing humans. You now scan your Oyster card or a credit card, and it tracks what stop you get on, where you get off, in addition to surveillance. And everything is really going toward that trend. We actually had a funny thing, though, that happened the previous time before that, where people were still in the kiosks. It had been a while since Dev and I had been there, and Dev walked up to the woman in the kiosk, and he goes, I want to get one of those clam cards. She looked really perplexed. And she said, I don't know what you're talking about. And he kept repeating, a clam card, a clam card. I know it's the stuff that you guys are using now, a clam card. All of a sudden, she did what you're doing. She burst out laughing because it's an oyster card. So he got the wrong shellfish.
Same ballpark.
Same ballpark. Just no one knew what he was talking about.
I just looked up. The average American is caught on camera around 34 times a day, 238 times a week.
Wow. And that's what we're told, right? So there's probably more.
That's the AI overview, too. So you can take what you want from that.
With a grain of salt. It's funny because AI Google, apparently Dev asked an AI chatbot, how often are you correct when I ask you answers to questions? And it said something like 70%, which is not really the best. I mean, 30% not right is kind of a lot.
Yeah. I mean, think of anything that you want done right. Do you want it done 30% like possibly wrong?
No, I don't. Buffy mentions spider sense, and that is another reference to Spider-Man, which has happened previously on the show. Spider-Man has been mentioned a couple of times. There's a really strong vibe between Jenny and Giles. To me, their sparring relationship is a bit like Hepburn and Tracy.
Absolutely. It's flirting and fighting at its best.
Combat flirting. It's like the pulling the pigtails, but the adult version of that.
Although it seemed like she was pulling his pigtails more.
She was. And again, here we are back to that idea that we teach that that's romance. And I don't necessarily think that pulling someone's, hurting someone by pulling their pigtails is a romantic gesture. So maybe we got to look at that.
Definitely not. Don't touch my hair.
Yep. Giles says that we are creating a society where human interaction is all but obsolete. And that was my point 3, and we've talked about it. It's wild that already then that was being discussed. Jenny's the one who notices that the book is empty, and then we learn again in the passing shot information. There was a medical emergency because the penicillin allergy info was tampered with.
I thought that was very slick. They just slipped that in there, and they don't pull too much attention to it.
I loved that. A lot of the exposition and some of the scary things are told in a non-direct way, not laying on it, and yet the information is imparted. When Dave and Buffy face off, Sarah plays it very directly. Her focus is really trained on him, and Chad plays it twitchy, like he's high. He seems like an addict.
Mm-hmm.
One of the other points we mentioned. And I loved that scene between the two of them because their energies are so different. She's so powerful and female warrior in that scene, and he's really frenetic.
You see just how the world that he is absorbed in is affecting him.
And it starts to give you an idea that it may not go too well for Dave. Fritz tries to kill Buffy in the shower by shocking her, like I discussed happened to me in our How to Kill a Boy on a First Date episode with Ashby Semple. My nemesis, Ashby Semple. Did you have a high school or grade school nemesis?
5th grade birthday party. Those who were there, they remember. They know what happened. The girls in our class ended up in therapy sessions for a while afterwards. So that was enough for school.
Yeah, that sounds awful.
It was.
Yeah, girls can be mean. Ashby really she ended up the guy that I had a crush on, so she wasn't being mean. But girls, there can be that pack mentality that we talked about in the pack with both boys and girls. But girls to other girls can go to a really toxic, nasty level.
It's rough because I think that girls end up sharing a lot, especially at that age. We want to be liked. We want to be accepted by our peers. And a lot of that is through being vulnerable. And so we'll share something of ourselves to one person and somehow it gets around because they're using it as currency to get closer to somebody else. And before you know it, you're in an argument and that information slaps you in the face from somebody who should have never known about any of it. And it really throws you off balance.
When Dave is having second thoughts, again feels very much about addiction, computer addiction. Malcolm saying, all that I want is your love. And when there's no traction with Dave, it gets scary. The suicide note starts getting written. Fritz is there, and he's not playing around. Giles, Buffy, and Xander discuss all the problems that could arise: nuclear missiles, medical info, traffic, the economy. We've covered some of them ourselves, and they start talking about the ramifications that all of this can have. I really like that Buffy calls Fritz and those like him zomboys. I've never heard that before or since, and I thought it was great.
Yeah, we should keep that one.
I like zomboys.
My book just came out.
I'm so excited to finally read what you've been working on, Daddy-O.
I hear it's about mental health. Mark Metcalf's memoir, Timmy, is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble now. The ebook will be available on all platforms soon.
The first time that we see Willow's house, I think this is where they went on tour at Hellmouth Con, and then I met them afterwards at Buffy's house, which is the house owned by Jean, who I talked with in one of our Countdown bonus episodes. I feel like this sequence is like a much darker version of You've Got Mail. I was picturing the trailer for this. Willow and Malcolm have discovered the best way to meet someone online. Hi, is to never meet them at all. Wait a minute, Mr. Postman. That will only go over for the people that actually know the You've Got Mail trailer, but it made me think of that, the scary version of that. That whole sequence of Willow at home is very horror movie-ish. The theme music, though, is more sci-fi, and it feels like it's exploring what is beyond us. The fear of technology, as we've discussed in that whole sequence, is really fleshed out.
I don't know what the world is coming to. Back in the day, you would meet the people you want to date and the people you want to kill in person, not online.
Okay. Thank you, Drew, yet again.
It's a lot harder nowadays, Drew, just saying.
As I mentioned before, Fritz is the character in Bride of Frankenstein. Fritz here is that character for Moloch, and Willow, as we get into this later part, she in essence is the bride. Doesn't that analogy feel like
really spot on?
Yeah.
Sorry, I just pictured her with the hair and everything. But
That would be
recoiling from Moloch just the way that the bride recoils from Frankenstein's monster.
Oh, yeah, that would be great, right? With all of a sudden the hair goes back. And
yes.
When we're back at the library and scary stuff is happening on the news and Jenny comes in, we find out that she knows. And it's a big deal because she's being brought into the fold. She's an outsider who knows about the supernatural.
Spoiler alert.
Yes, Jenny definitely knows about Angel and Jealous, but we'll get to that later, Drew. At Willow's house, Xander figures out that they are at CRD, and it's not Buffy. That's unusual, because usually Buffy's doing this sleuthing and figuring everything out, so that was a bit different in this episode.
But again, I think that's one of the great reminders of the show is that you're getting to see how everyone gets to contribute, and he was so proud that he knew something.
Yes.
So cheers for Xander on that.
When we're back with Giles and Jenny at the library, we learn more that she specifically knows about Moloch, the corruptor. She reveals that she is a techno-pagan. Do you know where that term came from?
No, I don't.
That term became popular in the 1990s, especially in California's cyberculture. In American Gods by Neil Gaiman, he played with this. He definitely used techno-pagan as well. They continue that Hepburn Tracy-like banter. Jenny calls him snobby. They keep going on. That's building more and more throughout this. I felt like when Willow is held captive, it's depicted the way alien abduction often is.
Yeah.
And it also felt very much like 2001 and Hal. Moloch's casing, to me, looks like the Predator.
Yeah, especially the chest plate, the height, the headpiece. It's very reminiscent of Predator.
Corruptor uses love and says that everything is love. And that is like the Sydney chatbot that Kevin Roose interacted with and wrote about. And it's also like all Predators. Moloch does this thing where he switches that off in 1 second when he sees that there's no traction there. It's really cold. It's like a flipped switch immediately, and he just then sets his sights on someone else, which is what predators do. He did it with Dave once he realizes, okay, never mind, gone. And he does this with Willow at this point where he just it's done the minute he sees that she's no longer going to play along or play into his machinations.
He's got a very short fuse. Like, at least in the beginning with Willow, he puts the time in, but it feels like he's where he needs to get almost.
I know he's close, right?
Yeah, anybody, like, I don't have time for any of this extra stuff. Like, either you're on board or you're not.
He's not doing any of the seducing. But I found that with narcissistic people, that once they know that you see them and that you no longer are going to engage in the same way, they drop it. Even if it's been, I can't live without you, you're the person, I have to have you in my life. The minute that they really see that you see that none of that is real, they do move on so fast. And they look for the next victim, the next person that will buy into it.
It's funny. It seems like that's their own personal drug.
It is like a fix. Vampires aren't in this episode, but it is about inviting evil in and that idea of not knowing the scope of what you're dealing with. I think that's one of our primal fears.
Yeah, I mean, in order to fully enjoy life, you're supposed to be open. You're supposed to have a certain amount of vulnerability. Unfortunately, we have to learn through our own experiences where we have to set boundaries and we have to be a bit more cautious and learning who deserves to know more about us rather than just putting that information out there and letting anybody into your life.
It takes steps and people need to earn that and vice versa. It takes time to really get to know somebody. I think that's the other thing you're making me think of right now about this episode in a certain way is the whirlwind nature of it. I think sometimes is a tip-off that something isn't really healthy. It's that love bombing kind of thing. It's that all-encompassing thing that isn't really based in reality. It's that thing you were talking about, that uber idea of romance that isn't truly romance. It truly isn't about intimacy and human connection. It's fake. It's someone mirroring what you need to hear, which they're really doing to manipulate you. And that is very present in this episode because it all moves really fast. And all of a sudden, when Willow starts to be, I didn't tell you about Buffy's records, and like, how do you know that? So she starts to notice that it's going fast and that something's askew.
I feel like for most of us, there's a moment where we start to wonder, is this too good to be true? And either we talk ourselves out of it or a friend talks us out of it. And it takes a few more steps to figure out, is this person genuine or not?
Which is what we were saying, takes time. It does take time, where you earn each other's trust and you know if someone's genuine. With the spell, he gets bound again, but this time it's not in the book, it's in the robot. Willow asserts herself when she whacks him with the fire extinguisher can. She has been growing in each episode. She's been coming more and more into her own. And here she is physically being a warrior, which is a different side to her. Also, hell hath no fury. Oh, do you, by the way, know where hell hath no fury like a woman scorned comes from?
No.
It comes from William Concreve's 1697 play, The Mourning Bride. Mourning as in grieving, not time of day. Other Congreve quotes, "'Tis better to be left than never to have loved," and "You must not kiss and tell." Many think that all of these quotes are Shakespeare, not Congreve.
And it's another where they've all kind of gotten slightly changed over time and people retelling, but we still use these phrases.
We do.
What light through yonder window breaks? It is the east, and minion Juliet is the moon.
No, Drew, no. Oh, you know another thing that I love? I love when Giles tells Jenny that books smell, computers don't, because I love the smell of books. The ink from the printing, the paper. I don't know about you, but we have masses of shelves of books. Are you a book? I see some behind you.
Oh, this isn't even a drop in the bucket. So I've moved into my parents' old house and I'm very, very slowly fixing it up. But they both loved books. I loved books. Well, I still love books. So I have books on the windowsill. I have books in the hallway, books by the bed, books in the bed, and a room that's just a library. So, but
Ooh.
I love the way a new book smells, an old book smells. Walking into a bookstore just feels like being hugged. I love
I
it.
have the same thing. And there's something for me, I know it's easier if you're traveling or whatever on a Kindle, but for me, the tactile experience of page turning and when you crack open a new book and art books, coffee table books, like that smell too, when you open those every kind of book has its own sensory experience. I just delight in that.
I still give my nieces and nephews books. Some of them read, some of them don't want to and prefer their iPad. But my nephew absolutely loves getting read to before bed. And the joy on his face when you crack open a book, it's just like, whenever I see that, I think like, okay, we're all going to be okay. Everything's going to be fine.
I love it. Oh my gosh. So everyone send me your pics of bookshelves that you have on socials. We would love to see them. My socials are at Juliet Landau on Twitter, at Juliet_Landau on Instagram, Fans of Juliet Landau Facebook group, or Juliet Landau Official on Facebook too. As I mentioned in Welcome to the Hellmouth, Buffy never wears the same clothes twice, other than when a scene takes place later in the same day or night for continuity purposes. But other than that, it's always different. I think her closet is like the TARDIS. It's bigger on the inside because it couldn't possibly fit all of those clothes in a normal-sized closet. But in this episode, she does wear the same sunglasses by the fountain that she did in her femme fatale tailing outfit earlier. And she does wear the same boots sometimes too. I really love the work that costume designer Susanna Puesito did on season 1 of Buffy.
I know I had outfits that mimicked a lot of the ones that I saw on the show.
Oh, did you copy the
absolutely. That was the thing to do. You watched a show and then you tried to like come to school the next day or the next week and
emulate that.
Yeah. Sweater sets, mini skirts, boots. I did it. I still do it.
In the end, the dialogue, "We're doomed," they all laugh. And then the truth of what they said settles in. It's a heavy moment. I think that's one of the things that the show does too, is you flip from humor to pathos to fear to, it takes you through the gamut of emotions, which the life journey does, the warrior's journey does. And the writing of the show takes you through the gamut of all of those things.
I think it also, you get a resolution, but I never felt like the show at the end of an episode, we're told everything's fine now.
It doesn't wrap it all up in a neat little bow that isn't like life.
Yeah, and I think that that's, in a weird way, comforting because it's being honest with its audience.
Well, it makes it that much more relatable because you think that's what happens in my life. Nothing gets wrapped up in this neat little bow as much as we all hope it will.
Yeah.
We've already had quite a body count of characters that you think might be main or will be around for a while. We've had Darla, Flutie, Jesse, Luke, now Dave. That's a lot for where we are in the number of episodes into season 1.
It is, but I also really like that. It keeps you off balance. It keeps you wanting to watch because you know that nothing's guaranteed.
You never know what's going to happen. Like life, again. In 1 minute, we're here, we cannot be here.
It's like in Hitchcock's Psycho. Nobody was expecting him to kill off our lead actress.
Mm-hmm.
Spoiler alert. You should all have already seen this, but anyway.
Spoiler alert.
Okay. What is it? She's doing some sort of sign language or something. Oh, I think Drew is referring to the fact that Moloch is physically powerful, but uses love and uses mental abuse, psychological abuse, and that preempts what happens later with Angel. Is that right, Drew? I'll take that as a yes. I, Robot You, Jane made me think about characters and historical figures who pretended to be someone that they were not. Cyrano de Bergerac, which was written in 1897 by Edmund Rostand. Cyrano writes the verse that Christian uses to woo Roxanne, and he creates the relationship through words, and they're through someone else's words. In Russia, Dmitri, the youngest son of Ivan the Terrible, died as a result of an assassination attempt in 1591. There were not one, but 3 individuals who claimed his identity. They became known as False Dmitri I, False Dmitri II, and False Dmitri III. 1 and 2 didn't just steal Dmitri's identity, they formed international coalitions with their own armies and launched military campaigns supported by popular uprisings to claim the Russian throne. Number 1 actually became Tsar from 1605 to 1606. But it didn't end so well for all of the false Dimitris. Dmitri I was hacked to pieces and burned. Dmitri II was shot and then his head was cut off. And Dmitri III was executed. Did you know any of that?
I didn't. I just love that he was shot first and then beheaded. It just, I'm sorry.
I know. It's like it wasn't enough, right?
It's like, we just got to make sure. At the same point, I kept hearing, like, what isn't a name? Well, apparently a lot.
A lot, exactly. And do you know about Perkin Warbeck? He was one of the most famous pretenders in English history. He persuaded the courts of 3 European countries that he was actually Richard, Duke of York, son of King Edward IV and rightful heir to the throne of England. Warbeck made several landings in England, backed by small armies, but he met with strong resistance from the king's men, and he surrendered in 1497. He, too, was executed. I'm not sure if he was shot and beheaded, but he did not have a good end. The wild thing is that dealing with Warbeck cost Henry VII over £13,000, which in 2023-24, the equivalent would be £13 million.
Wow.
And it put a strain on Henry's weak state of finances.
You know, you got to give credit. If you're going to go and pretend to be somebody that you're not, you really have to go hard, go big.
You got to raise armies.
Yeah.
You got to storm continents.
Show up on a shore with a big boat and a whole bunch of boats behind you. Like, really? Yeah, give everybody a show.
Go big or go home, right?
I will admit, there were a few times in my life where I absolutely lied to get into a party. And I found that the best way of doing it was to really like assert, no, I'm on the list. I'm supposed to be here. And when you say it with enough confidence,
authority,
everyone believes it.
Right.
And it works.
Right.
So
at least you're pretending you weren't going after the throne or anything, so you wouldn't get beheaded if something was wrong and shot.
No. The worst I did was try to steal an ice sculpture of Yoda. That was the worst. But otherwise, it was just, a good time had by all.
Is that for real?
That is. I don't know what I was thinking at the time, but it was there, and I thought,
But it would melt anyway.
Yeah, I really wasn't thinking that clearly. At the moment, I was just marveling at an ice sculpture of Yoda. And I thought, okay, it's about half my size. I can at least get out the door with this. I couldn't budget, so it was fine.
You tried.
I did try. I left with a pillow. I did take a pillow home that night.
Do you still have it?
I don't. I lost the pillow on the way home.
All that with the risk of beheading and shooting, and you didn't even keep the pillow.
A fight broke out. I had the pillow in my arms, and I just went for the door, and then I left it in the taxi that I took back to the hotel. So,
wait, seriously, a fight broke out?
Yeah, it was wild. It was a wild night.
That was the moment to go for the ice sculpture.
I had already tried for the ice sculpture and it wasn't budging.
You could have gotten a couple cohorts while the distraction was going on.
Unfortunately, my cohorts were involved in the fight, so...
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was one of those where you're standing there, something starts to break out and you think, yeah, I'm just going to go. Okay, everybody's going to be good. All right, bye. And that was my exiting point.
Where were false Dimitri 1, 2, and 3 or Warbeck when you need them?
I tell you,
So, as far as the relatable theme of the episode, we've talked about a lot. There's the anonymity of the internet, there's predators online, there's getting isolated and not socializing, spending hours and getting misinformation, there's computer or device addiction, there's fear of technology, fear of the new, fear of change, there's computer dating. Sire Rebecca, do you have one of these themes that you relate to?
I can relate to multiples, but I actually met my ex-husband online, and it was while I was in college, so it wasn't long after the show started. And at the time, online dating was still really frowned upon, and, nobody wanted to say that that's where they met somebody. So we both decided, we were talking about books, funny enough, and we decided that we would tell everyone that we met through a mutual friend who had set us up because he lived in Ohio at the time while I was in New York.
Oh.
So it's kind of hard to explain how we bumped into each other.
Your ex, to some degree, was your Moloch. He was a narcissistic person. So in some ways, it mirrors that too. Am I right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I heard everything I wanted to hear at the time. He was everything that none of the guys around me were. And when we eventually, got together in person, I continued to carry the person that I knew him as in my heart, as opposed to, paying attention to how he was in
really
person.
Was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we all ultimately end up having to stumble and fall multiple times and until, you realize actually it's a lot of words, but there's no meaning behind it. Your actions don't match up with the words. And in the end, it took a long time for me to put my foot down and in the end say that as much as I love you, I need to love myself more. And that's what Willow did. But she got there a lot faster than I did.
Well, it is an episode of a TV show. Our life lessons are a little harder earned, I think. I did hear from Ashley Chung, who is at Ash G. Chung on Instagram, who knew this episode was coming up and shared that she met her hubby online. They dated online and long distance, and now they are together for 10 years. And also Lisa Orange from Facebook, who shared that she and her husband were some of the early users of Match.com, and they have been married for nearly 30 years. So those are some positive stories to where people weren't catfishing or presenting themselves in ways that they really weren't, but obviously were presenting themselves as who they truly were and got to connect with people.
That's beautiful.
I know. Incredible. What about you, Drew? Do you have a relatable theme that you want to talk about?
Spiral colors of jelly.
Okay. Let's just go on to the tattoo. Sire Rebecca, do you have a line from this episode that you would get as a tattoo?
When Buffy says,
Tell me the truth. How's my hair?
That's a perfect one. I love that.
how about you?
I had a couple runners up. Mine were all Xander lines. Xander, when Willow won't go to the bronze, Buffy says,
She certainly looks perky.
Yeah, color in the cheeks, bounce in the step. I don't like it. It's not healthy.
That one I love. Another runner-up is Xander at the library when Jenny reacts to them being at the library again. And he says,
To read makes our speaking English good.
I like that one. And then my pick would be when Xander is in the library and Giles explains about Moloch and says,
For those of us in our studio audience who are me.
I just love that. Drew, what's yours?
I suck the marrow from Willow's wafy bones.
That is not in the episode, Drusilla.
It should be.
Okay.
Enough of something extremely different.
Different.
Commuting to set, my commute's usually like an hour and a half each way minimum. And so I'll listen to a lot of audiobooks and I'll listen to podcasts while I'm driving. And I was sitting in traffic and I realized that like I was hunched over the steering wheel and making a really crazy face because of what I was listening to. And I look over to the side of me and the people in the car next to me are watching, just like kind of horrified. And then I looked up in the mirror and I saw the look on my face and it was like this. And it was in a moment of like, please don't go in that room. Don't go in that room. Somebody's going to get you. Oh my God. So yeah, next time you're in traffic or you're driving along and you're listening to something, you're singing along, just take a moment to just look at the reactions from the people around you. It's totally worth it.
You were having a private moment.
It was terrifying. Like, I like a good spooky story, and you knew nothing good was about to happen, and you're just saying like sitting in the movie theater watching somebody going down into the basement to check a creepy noise. Like, why are you doing this? Why? We know that something bad's going to happen to you. You're not going to come back. But to actually see people watching you make those faces, it's amazing.
You made me remember that I was once shooting a movie in Griffith Park where I had a full-on clown makeup and I was splattered with blood, tons of blood. And when I wrapped, it was something like 5 a.m. and I didn't want to shower there. I just thought, oh, I'll just go home and I'll shower at home. And I was in my car driving home in full-on clown regalia, bloody. And luckily I live in Los Angeles, so people aren't as freaked out. They're used to production and stuff like that to some extent. But the car next to me pulled up at a light and did the most extreme dinosaur take and had this look of terror on their face and then sped off through a red light to get away from me in my car. And for the first, I forgot, because when you're in makeup, there comes a certain point where you forget. And then I kind of reached up and I felt like the big, clown wig and everything on me, matted with blood. Oh, yeah. That's why I got that response.
I used to work at Prosthetic Renaissance, and we had done a trial of a head wound for a film, and we needed somebody to be the test dummy. So I said, yeah, no problem. So we did it a few times, and I realized I didn't have a change of clothes with me. So I drove home in a trash bag over my clothes, still with blood all matted to my hair.
Oh my gosh.
The weirdest thing you could do is like turn and purposely smile at people while you're driving. Nobody knows how to handle that. So,
oh my gosh. At least you weren't on public transport.
True. That would have been a very long trip home.
My friend John lived in East London and had a string of really bad luck with roommates. The first one was slobby, left dishes, food, dirty laundry all over the flat. The second one brought someone home every night, someone different. The third one, who had a really unusual name, Milky, got mixed up with drugs. So John decided, I'm just going to live on my own for a bit. One night, about 6 months later, he was riding home on the tube. He gets off at his stop. He rounds the corner in the tunnel. It's completely empty. All of a sudden, a figure steps out of the shadows with a knife and says, "Give me all your money." John is terrified, and he does a double take, and he's trying to see in the patchy light, and he goes, "Milky, is that you?" And there's this really long pause, and he hears, "John, is that you?" And then there's another really long pause, and Milky goes, "How you doing?" And John goes, "Yeah, I'm all right. And you? And Milky, still brandishing the knife, says, well, you know, things could be better. John is thinking, no kidding. And they just stand like that, Milky brandishing the knife, eyes locked on one another, for a really long, protracted time. And then Milky says, well, it's been really great seeing you, John. Really good to catch up. John says, incredulously, yeah. And Milky waits another few beats and then says, okay then. And he puts the knife back in his pocket and he ambles off. And my friend John was just like, what the hell? I just love that story. That Milky, is that you?
I was wondering, like, how do you walk out of this situation? Do you play it off? Do you just acknowledge it for what it is and go like, yeah, it is. And it seems like that's what they did. It's so things you're never expecting.
So surreal, right?
Mm.
And if you saw it in a movie, you'd be, that's too much. That couldn't happen. Oh my God.
The things that happen in our lives are crazier than anything on the screen.
What about you, Drew? Do you have something you want to share?
Spoiler alert. I had a lovely train ride to Sunnydale in 2001. First there were 100. And then there were 2. Me and Miss Edith.
Okay.
The missing scene that could have been in this week's episode.
Okay, Self. I think it's time to make a list of dating don'ts. Don't date guys with horns. No demons who write in books. No fangs, scales, or fur. Well, maybe I would allow for fur on a full moon. No one with corruptor in their name. Fritz on anyone pals with a Fritz. Nix on metal armor. Nada on robots. Goodbye to anyone like Hal from 2001. Sayonara to an age gap. 605 years should have been a tip-off. Arrivederci to computer dating. Giles, is that you? What are you doing?
Nothing. Allergies.
Giles?
It may be a bit of a cold.
Giles.
Adventure. Excitement. Desire. Realms of the unknown. All right, I was smelling some of the books.
Well, Rebecca, this has just flown by. It was so much fun hanging out with you, as it always is. I am so excited to be on the Re-Vamped journey with you. I cannot wait for everyone getting to know you. It's just amazing.
It's been such a blast. And my cheeks hurt from laughing. So that's always a great sign.
Re-Vamped Ease, please correspond with me on Twitter at Juliet Landau or on Instagram at Juliet_Landau and on the Fans of Juliet Landau Facebook group or Juliet Landau official Facebook page. And we will see you next week when we do it again. Until next time, rewatch, revamp, reinvent, and be remarkable you.